Trump cut off Obama 6 times in one night, but the 7th response left him silent and the audience on its feet. The lights inside Philadelphia's Constitution Center were harsh, bouncing off the floor and glimmering in the rows of cameras at the back. This wasn't just another debate. It was framed as a conversation about the future of American democracy, though everyone knew the real draw was seeing Obama and Trump face to face, live. From the moment they stepped on stage, the mood shifted. Obama moved with calm precision, his wave to the audience familiar and steady. Trump's entrance was sharp, quick strides, shoulders back, chin high, daring the room not to watch. Cheers and groans mixed together, filling the hall. People had traveled from across the country. A retired teacher from Scranton sat in the second row, eyes fixed on the stage. A student from Baltimore streamed live from his phone. Reporters scribbled notes as fast as the moderators could keep up. Only minutes in, the tension was already unbearable. The moderators, 2 veteran journalists, tried to anchor the night. One leaned in and spoke clearly. "We're here to talk about where democracy is headed, how to protect it, strengthen it, and ensure every voice is heard." Obama straightened his tie, glanced at the crowd, then his notes, though everyone knew he didn't need them. Trump tapped impatiently on the armrest, restless and eager. The contrast was obvious, one ready to reason, the other ready to attack. When Obama finally leaned toward the mic, the room went silent. "Look," he began, his voice warm and direct, as though speaking to each viewer at home. "This is bigger than any one of us. Democracy isn't just passed down. It's something we create, piece by piece, every single day." His words lingered in the air. Obama's words were calm but firm, and a few heads in the crowd nodded along. For a moment, silence filled the hall, until Trump suddenly leaned in and cut him off. Yeah, we've heard all that before," he barked, waving his hand. His voice sliced through the steady rhythm Obama had set, sending a ripple across the audience. Some laughed nervously, others groaned, and the moderators exchanged a knowing glance. This was only the beginning. The cameras zoomed closer, catching every expression. Obama leaned back slightly, his face unchanged, letting Trump's interruption linger. The difference between them couldn't be clearer. One calm and deliberate, the other charging forward without pause. The energy in the room shifted from quiet anticipation to open confrontation. Shoulders stiffened, whispers spread, and everyone realized this wouldn't be a normal discussion. The second interruption came quickly. Obama had just resumed, stressing the need for steady leadership in times of crisis. "Leadership isn't about being the loudest," he said. "It's about listening, about respecting the people you serve." Trump lunged forward, his chair creaking into the mic. "Respect? Are you kidding? Where was the respect when you left the border wide open? When jobs went overseas? You don't even know the meaning of the word." Gasps and uneasy laughter rippled through the crowd. The moderators tried to calm things down, but Trump pushed louder, gesturing wildly as though he were at a rally. "I built businesses. I created jobs. And you? Division? Debt? More speeches. Always speeches." This time, Obama turned directly to him, not with anger, but with a steady look that made the back rows sit straighter. His hands stayed flat on the table, one thumb tapping slowly. "Donald," he said evenly, "if you're going to interrupt, at least let me finish my sentence first." The crowd erupted. Applause and laughter rolled through the hall like a wave. Trump flushed under the lights but smirked, as if even being corrected kept him in the spotlight. One moderator jumped in. "Let's allow President Obama to finish his thought." Obama leaned forward again, his voice clear and direct. "This isn't about scoring points," he said. "It's not about who can shout the other down. It's about whether we can face the problems this country has. Problems that don't care about party lines or who gets the last word," Obama said. The audience listened closely. a construction worker from Ohio with arms folded, a young mother from Delaware holding her breath. For a moment, the forum seemed steady again. But with Trump on stage, balance never lasted. As Obama shifted to healthcare, Trump jumped in. "Don't even start. You ruined it. Premiums soared. People hated it. You had your chance. You blew it." The crowd split instantly, half groaning, half cheering, their voices echoing against the walls. The moderators tried to intervene, but Obama stayed calm. He turned slightly toward Trump and said almost lightly, "Donald, if people truly hated it, you wouldn't still be talking about it 10 years later." Laughter rippled through the hall, followed by applause, even from some who hadn't clapped before. Trump sat back, shaking his head, lips tight. The moderators sighed with relief and promised each man uninterrupted time for the next question. But everyone knew Trump wouldn't wait, and Obama would keep waiting him out. The tension between impulse and patience grew sharper with every minute. Across the country, people leaned in, families in living rooms, diners filled with customers watching TVs over counters. The first interruption had set the tone, the second showed what kind of night it would be. But the third turned the forum into something else entirely. Obama had just started outlining the balance between security and freedom, referencing America's past challenges, when Trump cut in again, finger pointed across the table. "Freedom? You destroyed it with your spying programs. You spied on Americans. You're the last person who should lecture anyone about freedom." Chaos broke out. Cheers, boos, gasps, while the moderators were drowned out. The event was no longer a careful forum. It had become Trump's stage. Through it all, Obama stayed still, letting the noise wash over him. Obama leaned forward, hands folded, his eyes on the moderators instead of Trump. "If I may finish," he began. "Finish what?" Trump snapped. "Another excuse? Another story about how you knew best? The country was tired of you, Barack. That's why we won." The words "we won" hung heavy. The crowd exploded again. Cheers, boos, some on their feet. Security shifted along the walls, and even the moderators looked shaken, flipping through their cards for a question that might calm things down. Obama didn't flinch. He tilted his head slightly, then answered with quiet precision. "Donald, winning an election is one thing. Leading a country is another, and they're not the same." The hall erupted. Applause thundered louder than before, carrying a sense of relief. Obama had finally drawn a line. Cameras caught raw emotion. A veteran dabbing at his eyes, a teen gripping his father's arm, an elderly woman nodding along. Trump scowled but pressed on. "Spare me the lecture. You gave us 8 years of failure. 8 years where nobody respected us. You made America weak. Mr. Trump, please, let him finish," a moderator urged. But the moment had already spun out. Still, Obama stayed composed. He waited, letting Trump's rant and the crowd's noise fade, then spoke softly, his tone calm but heavy with weight. "What weakens America is when we treat each other as enemies instead of neighbors. When leaders think shouting is the same as solving problems. That doesn't make us strong, it makes us small." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Applause thundered through the hall, the loudest yet. Even the moderators sat back, realizing they had just seen the night's first true turning point. Trump muttered into his mic, waved a hand, and leaned back. For the first time, his momentum slipped, and the audience felt it. Viewers at home noticed it too. The moderators jumped in quickly. "We need to move on to our next subject. Both of you will have equal time." The cameras panned across faces lit with energy, not just from what Obama said, but how he said it. Calm against chaos, composure against noise. But Trump wasn't finished. His interruptions weren't calculated. They were instinct. And when the fourth one came, the clash grew so sharp it nearly shattered the moderator's control. By then, the air in the hall was electric. The audience wasn't just watching anymore. They were reacting to every word, every pause. The moderators leaned in, voices firmer, trying to hold order as Trump's energy surged. The next question was about national unity. How do you see the country? One moderator began. The moderator's question on healing division gave both men a chance to speak about unity and leadership. Obama leaned forward, voice steady. Unity doesn't mean we all agree on everything, he said. It means recognizing that even when we disagree, we share the same country, the same future. If we lose respect for one another, we lose more than elections. We lose the glue that holds us together. Soft applause followed, some heads nodding, but it didn't last. Trump shot forward. Respect. You spied on me, tried to destroy me, rigged everything against me. Don't talk about respect. You don't even know what it means. The hall shook with noise, cheers clashing with boos. Moderators tried to speak over it. Security shifted, but the shouting drowned everything out. Obama sat back, hand on his, chin, eyes fixed on Trump. The silence stretched until he leaned in, his voice sharp, but light. Donald, if you really think the government spent all its time and resources on you, that says more about your ego than our policies. The room erupted. Applause, laughter, even cheers from the balcony. One moderator couldn't help but smile, before regaining composure. Trump's jaw tightened, his fingers drummed on the desk. Into the mic, he muttered, "Total disgrace." Obama waited, then addressed the audience directly. The real danger isn't whether one man feels targeted. The real danger is when politics convinces us the other side is always the enemy. That's when we don't just divide Congress, we divide families, communities. And that's not who we are. His words rippled through the hall. A man in a baseball cap rose clapping. Students whistled from the balcony. Even skeptics had to admit his calmness was winning the room. But Trump wasn't finished. "Don't lecture me about division," he barked. "You divided this country more than anyone. You weakened law enforcement, you encouraged chaos, you left us worse off. That's why people turned to me." A moderator raised a hand. "Mr. Trump, please, we need to allow the president to finish." But Obama only lifted his hand slightly, signaling he could handle it. His face remained composed. "Donald," he said, "shouting about chaos doesn't make you the solution. Sometimes it just makes you part of the problem." The response was instant. Cheers, applause, even a standing ovation from part of the hall. Trump leaned back, irritated, as the audience tilted further toward Obama with every exchange. For the first time, the moderators exhaled, sensing Obama's composure was pulling the night back from collapse. Still, everyone knew Trump wasn't retreating. The interruptions kept coming, sharper each time. By the fifth and sixth, it was no longer just about words. It was about who could control the room. Everyone knew the pattern now. Obama would begin, Trump would cut him off, and the moderators would scramble to restore order. But the fifth interruption carried a new weight, tilting the energy of the hall. The question was on foreign policy, Obama's territory. He began carefully, explaining that alliances worked best when leaders built trust and treated partners with respect. That's when Trump pounced. "Alliances? You gave everything away. You bowed to other leaders, let them walk all over us. I stood up to them. I made them pay their share. You didn't." His voice boomed so loud it peaked the microphones. The hall erupted, cheers and jeers clashing in a deafening roar. Obama stayed still for a moment, glancing at Trump, then back at the moderators. Leaning into the mic, his voice was low but steady. "Donald, diplomacy isn't about walking into a room and handing out bills. It's about building trust. So when things go wrong, others stand with us, not against us. That's what keeps America safe." The applause was immediate, deeper this time. Not playful laughter, but solid approval. Trump shifted, eyes scanning. The crowd, lips pressed tight. Before Obama could continue, Trump slammed his hand on the desk, the crack echoing through the sound system. Safe? You left the world in chaos. Look at the Middle East, North Korea, China. You made America weaker, and everybody knows it. Everybody. The crowd's roar grew louder, the chaos drowning the stage. Mr. Trump, please, let President Obama finish, a moderator shouted over the noise. Trump ignored it, leaning in, gripping the mic stand, repeating one word like a hammer. Weak, weak abroad, weak at home, weak everywhere. Obama leaned back, shoulders loose, almost settling into the storm instead of resisting it. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but commanding. If strength is measured by how loud you shout, then maybe you've been confusing noise with leadership. Real strength is measured by whether you leave the country better than you found it. The hall erupted again, but this time the applause rolled in waves, steady and deliberate. People stood, clapping in rhythm, some whistling, others nodding firmly. The sound seemed to press Trump back into his chair. He forced a smile, but his jaw was tight, his hand clenched around the microphone. He muttered something under his breath, but the words didn't carry. The moderators exhaled like they'd been holding their breath for minutes. One leaned toward Obama. Please continue. Obama nodded, though his eyes lingered on Trump a beat longer than before. It wasn't anger, it was calculation, a patience that looked like it might finally run out if pushed again. The room felt electric. This wasn't just a debate anymore. It was two styles of leadership colliding. Chaos against calm, volume against precision. Viewers across the country, families in Michigan, diners in Ohio, bars in Nevada, leaned closer to their screens. They weren't just listening to policy. They were studying body language, reading pauses, measuring control. Trump still carried energy, but his constant interruptions were starting to grate. Even some of his own supporters shifted uneasily, glancing at the stage with faint discomfort. Meanwhile, Obama seemed to draw strength from the interruptions. Each time he was cut off, his replies landed heavier, sharper. He wasn't just answering, he was waiting, using the rhythm of Trump's outbursts to time his lines for maximum impact. By the 6th interruption, the tension was unbearable. Everyone in the hall, and millions at home, felt something had to give. And it did. When the noise finally died down, the air buzzed with nervous anticipation. Even the moderators looked cornered, cameras zooming in on every flicker across the two men's faces. Obama didn't rush. He sat back, posture loose, one hand resting lightly on the table. He wasn't staring at Trump, but somewhere past him, as though weighing not only what to say, but how to say it. The silence dragged on, uncomfortable for Trump, who fidgeted, tapped his fingers, adjusted his tie. He looked around as though silence itself was an opponent he couldn't beat. But for the audience, the pause was magnetic. They leaned in, waiting. And then, finally, Obama leaned forward. His voice was calm, almost quiet. You know, he said, glancing briefly at Trump, interruptions don't make arguments stronger. They just make them louder. The line landed like a strike. The audience erupted. Applause, laughter, even shouts of agreement. Trump forced a smirk and leaned back, but irritation flashed in his eyes. Obama let the wave of reaction roll through the hall before continuing, slower now, fully in control. Obama's cadence slowed, deliberate. When I was president, I learned something important. If you spend all your energy cutting people off, you don't have any left to actually listen. And if you don't listen, you can't learn. And if you don't learn, you can't lead. The hall broke into applause, steady, rolling, meaningful. It wasn't chaotic cheering, but a wave that carried relief. People clapped, not just in agreement, but because the contrast on stage was undeniable. One man shouting, the other waiting, then striking with words that couldn't be ignored. Trump leaned into his mic, voice sharp. "That's your problem. Too much listening, not enough action. I act. I get things done. You talked for 8 years and delivered nothing." But something had shifted. The interruptions no longer landed the same way. The response to Trump was weaker, scattered claps, a few cheers and groans from those tired of the cycle. The moderators shared a glance, sensing the tide turning. Obama didn't jump in. He waited, letting the air settle. Then, calmly, "Donald, the difference between action and chaos is whether you're building something or just tearing things down. Anyone can shout. Anyone can break things. But real leadership is about building, about leaving something that lasts longer than you do." The room erupted. This time the applause rose into a standing ovation. People in the back stood, clapping above their heads. The sound echoed through the hall. Even the moderators couldn't hide a smile. Trump shook his head, muttering into a half-turned mic. Frustration etched across his face. For the first time all night, it wasn't Obama who looked tested. It was Trump. Then Obama did something unexpected. He leaned back and said nothing, letting the ovation roll on. His silence wasn't hesitation. It was ownership of the room. He scanned the audience as if listening to them rather than speaking at them. The crowd noticed. What they had expected, to be a brawl, had become something else entirely. A lesson in patience, in control, in how silence could speak louder than shouting. The moderators leaned into their mics, steadier now. "Thank you. Let's move to the next question." But everyone knew they weren't just moving on. They were moving towards something. The momentum had shifted, and Obama's 7th line, the one he hadn't yet spoken, was about to define the night. The 7th interruption came right on cue, as if Trump couldn't help himself. The moderator had barely begun a question on leadership when Trump jumped in. The moderator had barely finished asking about leadership when Trump lunged in, voice sharper than ever. "Responsibilities? You were a disaster for responsibility. You left the country divided, weaker, broke. Don't sit there and act like you know anything about unity. You don't. Nobody believes that. Nobody." The audience roared, but the reaction split. Half cheering, half booing so loudly the moderators had to raise their voices to be heard. One finally pressed her hand to the table. "Please, please, both of you, order!" But the noise kept swelling, the cameras sweeping across faces in the crowd, many looking drained from the relentless interruptions. Then came the moment. Obama didn't rush, didn't try to shout over the chaos. He waited. He let the sound crest and fall, just enough for silence to creep back into the room. Only then did he lean slightly forward, his tone calm, almost conversational. "Donald," he said, pausing, "if you have to interrupt me 6 times in 15 minutes, it says less about me, and a whole lot more about how afraid you are of what I'm about to say." The hall erupted, not in confusion, but in thunder. Applause surged instantly, rolling through the room like a wave. People leapt to their feet, shouting, clapping, whistling. It wasn't just support, it was release. Weeks of tension, minutes of interruptions, all breaking at once. Trump blinked, caught off guard. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time that night, he had no comeback, no sharp line, no barked dismissal. His silence was louder than any interruption. Obama didn't gloat. He simply sat back, hands folded, letting the crowd carry the moment. The applause didn't fade. It built. Balconies stamping their feet. Front rows clapping until their hands reddened. Even some who'd cheered Trump earlier now sat still, faces showing something closer to reluctant respect. At home, living rooms, diners, dorms, all leaned closer to their screens. Clips were already being cut, shared, replayed. The line, short, sharp, undeniable, was becoming the headline of the night. Trump shifted uncomfortably, leaning back in his chair, fingers drumming against the desk, eyes darting toward the moderators before returning to the crowd. But there was no footing to find. For once, silence swallowed him whole. Obama leaned forward again, this time speaking not to Trump, but to the country. This nation doesn't need leaders who shout. It needs leaders who listen. Leaders who know that if you're afraid of the truth, you try to drown it out. But if you're confident in your vision, you don't need to interrupt, Obama finished quietly. You just let your ideas stand. The ovation that followed was deafening, forcing the moderators to pause once again. Some in the crowd waved their arms, cheering as though they'd been waiting all night for this release. Trump tried to speak, gesturing with his hands, muttering into the mic, but it was useless. The sound swallowed him whole. For the first time that evening, the momentum was gone from his grasp. One moderator leaned forward, smiling faintly despite the chaos. Let's allow the president to finish his thought. But Obama didn't add another word. He didn't need to. The seventh line had done its work. The room was his. And soon, so was the country. The eruption inside the Constitution Center spilled far beyond its walls, into living rooms, diners, newsrooms, and across every corner of social media. Camera crews scrambled to capture the crowd from every angle. People clapped above their heads, stamped the floor with their shoes, whistled until their throats ached. The energy leapt from one section of the hall to another like fire skipping rooftops. The moderators tried to steady the forum, but they couldn't stop the wave. "Let's keep the discussion moving, please," one said into the mic. But her words were nearly drowned by applause. Trump sat rigid, jaw tight, lips pressed, thin. He tugged at his tie, adjusted his cufflinks, leaned back as though nothing bothered him. But the cameras caught the flicker in his eyes, the irritation, the disbelief that the room had shifted so quickly. Obama remained motionless, hands folded, posture relaxed. It wasn't triumph on his face, it was composure. The composure of someone who understood the power of silence after a decisive strike. The crowd eventually began to quiet, though a buzz of excitement lingered. In the second row, a woman leaned to her husband, her words caught on a nearby mic. "That's the Obama I remember," her husband chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. Even some of Trump's supporters looked shaken. A man in a red cap muttered, "He shouldn't have let him get that one in." His neighbor didn't reply, just frowned at the stage as if questioning whether the interruptions had been the right move after all. The moderators pressed forward, trying to restore order. "Gentlemen, thank you. Let's move to our next topic, domestic priorities. Both of you will have equal time to speak." But equal time was an illusion now. The energy of the hall tilted toward Obama. Every eye watched him, waiting for his next move. Every gesture from Trump, the tapping fingers, the tilted head, felt exaggerated, like the motions of a man trying to claw back control. Obama leaned into the microphone again, not to jab, not to press his advantage, but to answer the question. "Domestic priorities aren't just about policies," he said. "They're about people, whether families in towns like Erie, Dayton, or Toledo feel the government is working for them. And that means more than slogans, more than interruptions. It means results." The audience broke into applause again, not thunderous this time but steady, like an echo of the storm that had just passed. They weren't just clapping at his words. They were listening. Trump jerked forward, desperate to reclaim the moment. "Results?" he barked. "You didn't deliver results. 8 years, nothing but talk. Jobs gone, borders wide open, crime through the roof. You left this country worse. And everybody knows it," Trump finished. But the words didn't land. The response was scattered, a few claps, some shouts, quickly swallowed by murmurs. The roar that had carried him earlier was gone. It was as if Obama's seventh line had drained the power from his strategy. Obama looked at Trump, then turned to the audience. If talking about people's lives is just talk, then maybe that's the problem. The crowd erupted again, louder. This time, energy rushing back to Obama's side. The moderators leaned in firmly. "Thank you, we'll move forward now. Each participant will have uninterrupted time." But everyone in the room knew the balance had shifted. The seventh line had redefined the night. The audience wasn't just watching anymore. They were participating, feeding off every exchange. Trump's shoulders were stiff, his jaw tight. Obama, by contrast, seemed even calmer, as though each interruption had only sharpened the contrast he wanted the country to see. The moderators no longer controlled the forum. The audience did, and the man holding them wasn't the one shouting, but the one who had silenced the shouting. What cemented the moment, though, wasn't Philadelphia. It was what happened hours later. By midnight, the clip was everywhere. News networks replayed it on loop. CNN ran it 3 times back-to-back before a panel broke it down. Fox aired it too, framing it differently, but still showing the line. MSNBC flashed the headline, "The night Obama shut down Trump." But the real force wasn't the networks, it was the people. On Twitter, hashtags exploded. Obama 7th line and Trump interrupted trended within the hour. TikTok filled with edits, some comedic, some dead serious, all replaying the same image of Obama leaning forward, calm and unshaken, as Trump finally fell silent. Instagram Reels racked up millions of views with captions like, "This is how you deal with a bully." The next morning, the replay was inescapable. Diners buzzed with it on the TVs above coffee counters. Truckers watched between bites of eggs and bacon. Students passed phones around classrooms whispering the line under their breath. In offices, co-workers gathered near break rooms mimicking Trump's interruptions and Obama's reply. At a small bar in Erie, Pennsylvania, locals leaned over their beers, eyes on the screen. One man laughed, shaking his head. He got him. "Never seen Trump shut down like that." Beside him, a woman wearing a jacket with an American flag patch nodded slowly, still staring at the TV. "He didn't just land a line," one commentator said. "He took control." Obama owned that stage without even raising his voice. Across the country, the clip sparked conversations in living rooms and coffee shops. In Des Moines, a father told his teenage daughter, "That's what I mean when I say leadership is about patience, not shouting." She laughed, comparing it to when she ranted about homework, and he answered with one sentence that made it all click. The point stuck. The moment escaped politics and entered everyday life. Coaches used it to talk about sportsmanship. Teachers replayed it in classrooms as an example of debate strategy. Comedians turned it into punchlines, mimicking Trump's interruptions before landing Obama's calm retort. But the real power of the clip wasn't just the words. It was how it made people feel. For those worn out by endless political shouting, it was a breath of fresh air, proof, at least for one night, that calm could overpower chaos, that composure could silence bluster. Trump's team scrambled to spin it. By morning, advisors insisted he hadn't been silenced, only that he had chosen not to respond. But the silence told its own story, and the internet doesn't forget silence. Even some conservatives admitted the blow had landed. A columnist wrote, "Trump has built his brand on dominance." Last night, for the first time, he was dominated. The clip became more than a highlight. It became a cultural marker. People remembered where they were when they saw it. They texted it to friends with the caption, "This is what leadership looks like." By week's end, it had been viewed over 150 million times, compared to other political turning points when a single sentence reshaped perception. Analysts debated poll numbers and media spins, but ordinary people weren't talking about statistics. They were talking about the feeling the moment left behind. That seventh line, delivered calmly after 6 interruptions, revealed something bigger than the debate. It showed the difference between noise and substance, between performance and presence. In Cincinnati, a retired firefighter explained it to his grandson on the porch. "Kid, leadership isn't about who yells the loudest. It's about who can sit in the storm and not let the storm run them." Obama didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. That's real strength. His grandson, just 13, nodded as the clip replayed on his phone. In St. Louis, a pastor brought it up during his sermon. When someone interrupts you again and again, you don't need to shout back. Sometimes the greatest power is in the pause. Patience has its own power, a pastor told his congregation. You don't have to fight fire with fire. Sometimes you let the other person burn themselves out. Then you speak your truth. The room murmured in agreement, some clapping softly, others smiling knowingly. Across the country, teachers built the moment into lessons on civics and communication. A debate coach in Denver told her students, "Notice how Obama used silence as much as words. Notice how Trump lost the room the moment he couldn't stop himself. That's a masterclass in control." Students scribbled notes, nodding, already planning how to use the tactic in their own debates. Even in offices, the clip became shorthand. In a Dallas boardroom, a manager told his team, "We don't need to be the loudest voice. We need to be the clearest." A woman in marketing added, "That's what Obama showed. You don't need 10 interruptions to make a point. You just need one sentence that lands." Heads around the table nodded in agreement. For millions of viewers, the takeaway was personal. It wasn't just about Trump and Obama anymore. It was about how to handle conflict in their own lives. Some thought about family arguments where everyone shouted at once. Others remembered tense moments at work, where they wished they'd stayed calm instead of snapping back. Obama's pause, his silence before speaking, became a kind of model. Slow down, breathe, and speak with clarity. The contrast between the two men had been stark all night. Trump, pushing, interrupting, raising his volume. Obama, waiting, listening, then striking with precision. But that contrast revealed something deeper. Composure is not weakness. Patience is not passivity. When paired with conviction, those traits can be stronger than the loudest voice in the room. Political experts called it a turning point. Social media called it a mic drop. But for many people, it was something simpler. A reminder that in life, you don't win arguments by talking over someone. You win them by making sure what you say actually matters. Maybe that was the greatest lesson of the night. Words have power, but only when they're timed, measured, and rooted in truth. Shouting might grab attention, but silence followed by clarity earns respect. Afterward, even the moderators admitted they had nearly lost control of the forum. But one told a colleague privately, "Obama saved it. He proved you don't need volume to win. You just need composure." That was the lesson people carried home. Into living rooms, into classrooms, into workplaces and churches. A lesson that outlasted the noise of the event itself. So if you're watching this, think about what it means in your own life. The next time someone interrupts you, or when you feel the urge to snap back, remember what happened that night in Philadelphia. Remember the pause. Remember the seventh line. Because leadership, real leadership, doesn't need to shout. It only needs to speak when the moment is right. And if you believe moments like this matter, if you believe patience, respect, and composure are values worth amplifying, then subscribe. Because these are the stories we'll keep sharing. Stories that remind us what real strength looks like.